To begin installation on your K&N 69-8703 air intake system, turn off the vehicle's engine and disconnect the negative battery cable. Lift up the engine cover to dislodge it from its mounting grommets and remove it from the engine. Pop up the centers of the 9 front cover fasteners and remove the fasteners. Then remove the front cover from the vehicle. Pop up the center of the fresh air intake scoop retainer and remove the retainer. Next, remove the fresh air intake scoop retaining bolt and remove the fresh air scoop from the vehicle. Now it's time to pop up the centers of the strut tower cover retainer clips and remove the retainer clips. Loosen the strut cover retaining nut and then remove the strut tower cover. Loosen the 2 spring clamps that secure the crankcase vent hoses to the intake tube. Then disconnect the crankcase vent tubes from the intake tube. Next, loosen the 2 hose clamps that secure the intake tube to the throttle body and airbox. Remove the intake tube from the vehicle. Disconnect the mass air sensor electrical connection and unhook the wiring harness from the airbox. Now it's time to disconnect the 2 vacuum lines from the secondary intake door vacuum switching valve. Remove the bolt that secures the secondary intake door vacuum switching valve to the airbox. Be sure to save this bolt because it will be needed later. Remove the 2 bolts that secure the airbox to the inner fender. Lift up on the airbox to gain access to the remaining vacuum line connection and wiring harness clip. Then disconnect the vacuum line and unhook the wiring harness from the airbox and remove the airbox from the vehicle. K&N recommends that customers do not discard the factory air intake. Remove the airbox mounting grommet from the inner fender. Next, remove the mass air sensor from the factory airbox. Install the mass air sensor into the K&N intake tube and secure it with the provided hardware. Install the long edge trim onto the heat shield. Some trimming of the edge trim will be necessary. Next, install the short edge trim onto the heat shield and trim any overlapping pieces. Install the heat shield mounting bracket onto the heat shield and be sure to place the provided spacer between the bracket and heat shield. Place the filter adapter onto the heat shield and secure it with the provided K&N hardware. Now it's time to install the inserted nut into the grommet hole in the inner fender. Next, install the heat shield assembly and secure the mounting bracket into the inserted nut installed in step 20. Place the provided rubber-mounted stud into the module mounting bracket. Install the heat shield mounting bracket onto the rubber mounting stud and secure it to the heat shield with the provided hardware. Install the K&N air filter and secure it with the provided hose clamp. Next, install the silicone hose onto the filter adapter as shown and secure it with the provided hose clamp. Install the provided silicone hose onto the throttle body and secure it with the provided hose clamp. Place the K&N intake tube into the silicone hose at the filter adapter, then into the silicone hose at the throttle body and secure it with the provided hose clamps. Connect the crankcase vent hoses to the K&N intake tube and secure it with the factory spring clamps. Reconnect the mass air sensor electrical connection. Secure the secondary intake door vacuum switch to the inner fender using the factory mounting bolt. Connect the secondary intake door vacuum supply hose to the solenoid port. Install the vacuum plug onto the open port of the secondary intake door vacuum switch. Next, install the fresh air intake scoop using the factory bolt and retaining clip. Install the strut tower cover and secure with the factory retaining clips. Place the front cover on the engine and secure it with the factory retaining clips. Reinstall the engine cover. Reconnect the vehicle's negative battery cable. Double check to make sure everything is tight and properly positioned before starting the vehicle. After 100 miles of driving, check the nuts and bolts and retighten if necessary.